first, I'm going to show you 7 concepts, indeed not all of the concepts, that he taught me in the 60s. And I'm presenting them in a chronological order because I did date the drawing, so I know that the sequencing. The first drawings that exercise that we did in the class was, and Martika touched upon the extension of lines to the edge of the picture plane, and he wanted us to extend first dotted lines, and then more solid lines to experience the surface of the picture plane, the movement, direction. So this was the first exercise. The second one is about closed shapes created with straight lines. These are the same subject matter and point of view. The first, the negative shape, closed shape, is very dominant and seemingly overpowering the figure. The second, there's a better balance between the positive and negative. You see that the shapes are pretty much constructed with straight lines to have a strong feeling for these shapes. The concept of building the space with overlapping frontal planes to sense the area as well as space and direction in and out. In this exercise, he said to put sections of the model stand and the wall behind into frontal planes. And here he's drawing on my drawing these dotted lines, taking points from the model stand. He says, ignore the diagonals because it's too much about perspective. Have the space create through overlapping frontal planes. So he's pulling from points out to the edge of the picture plane. And here is a diagram of his. All the drawings that I showed you so far, what I call extended drawings, they were done in about a 1.5 to 2 hour period. And in the beginning of the warm-up drawings, he wanted us to work with curved lines only, rhythmic lines, arcs, and concave, convex, curves that go into the figure and curves that move out into the space. So these were the types of warm-ups that we did before we did an extended drawing. Another concept is and I think the example that Martika showed is similar concept of extending lines off of planes to the picture plane. And here most of the planes are what I call open. You see 3 sides, but it's open on one side to create a movement and counter movements. And later on, just having a line to demark movement and placement on the picture plane. So this is constructing the figure in this space with open planes. This concept I call cubic volume. That I love this diagram that he did here. That he talks about understand the depth. The front of the plane is the flat 2-dimensional page. This, or this is up against the picture plane. But then how deep does the space go? And here, these planes indicating the furthest point for me, and how he diagrammed it. He said, you must understand that envelope of space, is that space a foot deep or is it a mile long? So that's something to understand, that not only the surface of the picture plane, but how deep does that three-dimensional space go? It's so important. This concept I call triangulations, where locating points in space, here mostly off of the figure, which are apex points that he then said to connect, which then started to create certain configurations, perhaps odd configurations, but an important exploration. And here, these diagrams that he did on my drawing, where he's showing these straight line connected, mostly triangulations, to sense the composition, movement, placement, all the above. So I've introduced 7 concepts where you're analyzing the space and the form on the picture plane, and then he let us alone for us to explore possibilities. And some of my drawings, I went into pure planes and making them somewhat go back in space, but also by smudging edges have them push up against the picture plane. So these are drawings of some of my explorations. But at the end of my study with him, I moved just into pencil, trying to refine, explore, and to construct the figure on the plane, these construction lines that then perhaps evolve into abstract shapes, which I was quite interested in. This is a sequence of diagrams that he did in the 70s as I was having a conversation at his dining room table, where he talks about the plastic evolution, that one could begin with a head that's somewhat representational, although I must say this is already abstract, but at least there's the curve of the head. You can move it into a more cubistic experience, so these mostly straight lines. He said then you can move it into symbol, the idea coming from this sequencing, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard this, and then you can go to blankness. But the blankness, which perhaps is like minimalism, the blankness has significance, is important because it came through the plastic evolution. And finally, this wonderful painting he did in 2007 that's in the gallery downstairs in Orbit. That I feel demonstrates the concepts that I was just showing you, where one expands one's the movements and the rhythm out beyond the picture plane. You can see how these lines really extend beyond. And he's indeed working with curved rhythmic lines because the rhythmic lines do suggest figures, and I am sure we all see multiple figures that are constantly in flux, and perhaps we all see different configurations. I certainly do every time I look at it. And the black denotes the negative spaces, which he says to move into the positive. And in the negative, you also experience image. He said he was after 2 things in his painting: scale, which I denote, and as we've discussed, he and I have discussed, is that the experience of looking at the painting is larger than the actual painting. It's an energy force that expands out. It might be through the directional forces moving out beyond the picture plane, but it also could be an expansion in one's own mind as one's experiencing the impact of the painting. And the other quality that he was after is content. And the content is the image. And he says that it must be connected to his subconscious. If it's not, if it doesn't have that strength and significance, the significant shapes, then it's not working. He says sometimes his paintings have scale, but the content isn't right. And other times, the opposite.